Hello and welcome back to Daily Story, your home for thrilling audio adventures. This is MagicSurprise F, and we are so grateful to have you with us. If you enjoy our tales, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this episode with a friend, and subscribing to the channel so you never miss a story. Now, get comfortable, and let's begin today's audiobook. Tonight's story is the one we promised. This is The Phantom's Sonata. My name is Clara Vance. Inheriting Blackwood Manor felt more like a burden than a gift, a dusty tomb of forgotten relatives. But inside the piano bench, I found it. A single piece of sheet music titled The Phantom's Sonata. The ink was faded, the notes almost alien, yet my fingers ached to play them. As a concert pianist suffering from a crippling creative block, the last thing I wanted was a crumbling Gothic estate. My agent called it a sabbatical. I called it a surrender. The house was a monument to decay, smelling of dust and untold years of silence. For days I wandered its halls, a ghost in my own right, until I found the music room. Dominating the space was a magnificent Bechstein grand piano, its ebony wood coated in a fine layer of dust. It was an instrument from another era, a sleeping giant. I ran a finger over the keys, expecting a discordant clang, but instead a pure, resonant note sang out, cutting through the silence of the house. It was a spark in the darkness of my apathy. It was inside the worn leather bench that I found the manuscript, The Phantom's Sonata. The composer's name was a smudged ruin of ink, but I could just make out the initials, J. Blackwood. A distant relative, no doubt. The music itself was a paradox, a chaotic flurry of notes that seemed to defy all traditional structure. Yet underneath the dissonance was a melody of profound, heartbreaking beauty. It was a cry of despair and a hymn of defiance all at once. My hands trembled as I placed it on the stand. I had to hear it. I had to play it. The moment my fingers touched the keys and began to follow the strange composition, the atmosphere in the room shifted. A sudden, inexplicable chill swept through the air, raising goosebumps on my arms. The light from the tall, arched window seemed to dim, and the shadows in the corners deepened, stretching like grasping hands. I played on, mesmerized. The sonata was a living thing, complex and wild. It felt less like I was reading music and more like the music was reading me, pulling on emotions I'd long since buried. When I played the final mournful chord, the room fell back into a heavy silence. But I was no longer alone. I could feel it, a definite, distinct presence. The subtle scent of old paper and rain-soaked lavender filled the air. I spun around, my heart pounding. Nothing. But the feeling lingered. A cold spot in the room, a pair of unseen eyes watching me from the shadows. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. The sonata was all I could think about. I spent hours at the piano, my fingers stumbling and struggling to master the piece's frantic, sorrowful passages. And with every attempt, the presence grew stronger. I'd hear faint whispers just at the edge of my hearing, like a sigh carried on a draft. Doors in the house would creak open on their own. Late at night, I'd see a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, a tall and slender shadow that would vanish the moment I turned to look. Driven by a mix of fear and an artist's curiosity, I delved into the Blackwood family history, spending an entire day in the dusty library. I finally found him in a leather-bound family ledger. Julian Blackwood, a musical prodigy born in the late 19th century. The entry was brief and clinical. It spoke of his genius, his reclusive nature, and his tragic descent into a melancholic madness. He was said to have died in a sanitarium, his name a stain the family tried to wash away. But the ghost in my music room didn't feel mad. It felt lonely. The sonata was the key. I knew it. It wasn't just a piece of music. It was a message, a story screaming to be told. One evening, as a thunderstorm raged outside, battering the windows with wind and rain, I sat at the piano, determined to play it perfectly. This time felt different. The notes flowed from my fingers with an unusual grace, as if another pair of hands were guiding my own. The dissonant chords, the soaring melody, the frantic arpeggios. I played them all with a passion that wasn't entirely mine. Then I reached a strange, repeating passage near the end. It was a sequence of 7 notes that broke the musical flow. I'd always stumbled over them, but now, guided by the unseen presence, I played them with crisp, deliberate force. Click. The sound was soft, but it cut through the thunder and the music. It came from the wall to my left, from a section of ornate oak paneling. I stopped playing, my breath held tight in my chest. Slowly I rose and walked towards the wall. I pushed, and a section of the paneling swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a dark, narrow opening. A door that was never meant to be opened. A wave of musty, stagnant air washed over me. With my phone's flashlight cutting a trembling beam into the blackness, I stepped inside. It was a small, windowless room, a hidden chamber. In the center stood a simple writing desk, a chair, and shelves filled with stacks of sheet music. This was Julian's studio, his prison. And he was there. His form was a shimmering, translucent outline against the far wall, a tall, gaunt man with wild hair and eyes that held a century of sorrow. He wasn't frightening. He was just an echo of a man, trapped in the room where his family had locked him away. On the desk lay a diary. Its pages told the real story. Julian wasn't mad. His music was simply ahead of its time, experimental and raw. His conservative family, ashamed of what they considered demonic noise, locked him in this soundproofed room to save themselves from scandal. They told the world he was insane. He died here, alone, his only legacy the music they tried to silence. The Phantom Sonata was his final work, a key, a musical combination he hoped a future musician would be sensitive enough to understand. He just wanted to be heard. I looked from the diary to the sorrowful spirit. "Julian, I hear you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. I promised him his music would not die with him. I would be his voice. I would perform his works and tell his story. As I spoke, his translucent form flickered. A faint, sad smile touched his lips, and a perfect note hung in the air. A sound of pure, unburdened release. Then he dissolved like smoke, leaving behind only the scent of lavender and the profound silence of a story finally told. My creative block was gone, replaced by a purpose. I had a masterpiece to share with the world.
Thank you for listening.
Be sure to join us next time on Daily Story, where a young photographer discovers his vintage camera does more than capture memories. It captures the souls of the recently departed in The Soul Catcher. That was The Phantom Sonata. We hope it sent a chill down your spine. This has been a production of Daily Story on the MagicSurprise F channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more audiobook adventures every week. Until next time, listen closely to the silence.